So now let's talk about arrays. Anytime you declare a variable and you use the square braces, we say that your variable is an array reference. You have two choices as to where to put those square braces. You can put them either next to the variable name itself or next to the data type. Either way is fine. They both work. I tend to put it next to the data type, but again, they're both equivalent syntaxes. And actually, if we're looking at this example in the book, it has string array title, comma, author. And this actually leads me to step back in this discussion to a point made earlier that I probably should have brought out. And so let me rewind just a little bit. We had something way back near the beginning of the chapter I didn't point out I should have. And that is that you're allowed to declare more than one variable in a single statement. So int age equals 30, comma, siblings equals 0, semicolon. And so it's okay to comma separate declarations if you'd like, but there are a few weird things that come up here. And so we do a quick tangent, but let me point this out. We'll bring up our Eclipse session, and we'll type in just some quick code here. Int age equals 30, comma, siblings equals 0, semi. All right, and maybe you do something where you printed out the age and print out the siblings. By the way, in Eclipse, anytime it has like a yellow highlight, it's what's called a warning. And so sometimes these are important to look at, sometimes not so much. It's an Eclipse thing, not a Java thing. In this case, the warning is that you haven't used that variable yet, the variable siblings. So if I try to maybe print it out, then it's fine. I typed in SIB sib and hit Control Space, and it filled in the rest for me. That sure cuts down on the typos. Well, perfectly legal. Int age equals 30, siblings equals 0, comma separate. Just as good, or maybe what I do more often, is I put them on two separate lines. By not doing the two separate lines, all we're saving ourselves is the declaration of the data type. They're both of type int. The one thing I don't like about this kind of a declaration is that somebody might think to do something like this. Int age, comma, siblings equals 0. Your first inclination would be that siblings is 0 and age is 0, but that would be incorrect. When you're doing these declarations comma separated, if you want to set a value to them, you have to do it immediately. That value at the end, that equals 0, only applies to siblings, not to age. And so for that reason alone, I personally prefer to declare these on two separate lines. Then it's very clear to me that maybe I need to initialize that age separately. So that's one thing. Just a little side note about Java declarations. That comes up because this example, this array example we have, declares an array called title of type string array and another one called author. Legal syntax, comma separated. We could have easily, though, done string array title, semicolon, and another line, string array author, semicolon. Anyway, so the point here, though, is square braces. That indicates that we're working with an array. What's an array? Well, an array is a variable that can store lots of values inside of it. So for example, here on the next line, we're using the word new to create the array, to say how many things do we want to store inside. You always have to use new with an array to give it a size, to say how much memory to allocate. So price is a new float array of size 44. Names is a new string array of size 10. Once you give it a size, like 44 or 10, you can't change it. It's stuck that size. You can ask it how big it is by accessing a field called length and determine how big that array is, what that size was that got passed into it. But it cannot be resized once you've specified that. So let me maybe type in a little bit of code here. We'll show you a little bit more what an array is. Perhaps I can draw a diagram or something up here. So I'll do string array days equals new string array. And I'll do 7 days of the week. Square brace, 7, semicolon. There we go. And again, this line could have been written as two separate lines. I could have said something like this, where the first line is the declaration of the variable. Days is an array of type string, so that's the kind of thing that days is. And then the second line initializes it, saying set days equal to 7 memory locations, 7 slots out in memory. No different from saying int age, semicolon, age equals 12. You can do it on two separate lines, or you could combine it together. Either way is fine. So same thing goes up here. Well, some people, when they look at this syntax where we combine them together, they say, well, isn't that kind of repetitious? You have string array on the left and string array on the right. Well, you got to think of it as two separate instructions that go to the virtual machine. To the left of the equal sign, we're indicating the data type of the variable. And to the right, we're saying how much space to set aside. How big is this thing? We want 7 elements that store strings to be available in memory. Once you've done that, we then should put values into it. Days, we count from 0 in arrays. Days sub 0. By sub, I verbalize it sub 0, but you use square braces with a 0 in between. Days sub 0 equals, we'll say Monday. Or is Sunday the first day? I guess it depends on who you talk to. Maybe Sunday's the first day. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, etc. And not only do I want to put different values in for each of these, I do need to move that value inside the square braces. It shouldn't be 0 for all of them. We should have something like this. So 0 is Sunday, 1 is Monday, etc. So the first line here, what we've done, and I'll draw a picture to represent this. Let me get a little bit of white space here that I can work with and maybe draw above this and have the code still visible. So we have the variable called days, and that is pointing at a chunk of memory of size 7. So there's actually 7 slots here in memory. 0, or we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, there we go. And days is pointing at that, what's called an array, that table almost of potential values. Each of these, if I go ahead and just kind of sneak in a little, maybe I'll make that smaller here. Each of these has an index. So the first one's 0, the next one is 1, etc. 2, 3, and you probably get the picture, 4, 5, and 6. Count from 0. There's 7 elements we count from 0. This is storing strings in it. And so since it's storing strings, what's actually in each of these elements is a pointer to the real string itself. And so out in memory, we have Sunday, and element 0 is pointing at, whoops, Sunday. And same thing would be true. We have another one for Monday, another one for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll fill in Saturday. I won't do them all here. So Saturday, element 6 is going to be pointing at that. If we had made this an array of like int or an array of float, then each element would actually store just that primitive value directly inside. But since it's strings, each element stores this pointer, this reference to an actual string that's stored elsewhere in memory. The default value, if you don't specify things like days 0 equals Sunday, days 1 equals Monday, with strings, the default in each of these is going to be a value called null, which is like the absence of a value. If this was actually an array of like int, then the default would be the default for the int. So it would be 0, or if it was an array of booleans, the default would be false. In our case with string, it default to null unless we specified code like we have here, where we've added new values. If I wanted to retrieve the size of the array, then I could simply, on that array element, I could invoke days.length. And so maybe I'd say int size equals days.length. And length is a little bit strange. When we did length on a string, we put 2 parentheses afterwards because we called a method. Arrays, I don't know why they did it. It's length is what they call a field. It's an attribute of it, and so there's no parentheses. But the length will always give you the initial size. In this case, it was size 7.